This is HQ, brought to you by AMC Plus, only the good stuff. Speaking of the good stuff, it's Wednesday. Jeremy St. Louis alongside Chris Hassel. Good news, you are halfway through the working week, and the college football season is about 85% done, and the cream has risen to the top.
And that cream on the top is kind of hardened a little bit, right? The top 7 in the playoff rankings unchanged. We saw the new rankings come out last night. Georgia, Alabama still 1-2, and number 2 Alabama facing 21st ranked Arkansas Saturday on CBS. The SEC Game of the Week is back at Bama for a top 25 matchup between the Crimson Tide and the Razorbacks. For Alabama, the stakes are clear. Win Saturday, and they punch their ticket to the SEC championship game against the top-ranked Georgia Bulldogs. And while Alabama continues to ride the hot hand of Heisman Trophy contender Bryce Young, Nick Saban trying to keep the focus on the present.
It's our last game in Bryant-Denny Stadium. That's been a great atmosphere to play in, and it's certainly needed to be that way for this game.
And Obama is a 20-point favorite. Arkansas is on the rise under head coach Sam Pittman, and they have a head-to-head win against Texas A&M, the only team to beat Alabama this season. A win Saturday would not only shake up the playoff race, it would put the Hogs in position for a New Year's Six bowl.
I was really proud of our guys being down at half, coming back. It wasn't pretty, but when that ball went through the uprights, it was one of the prettiest things I'd ever seen.
But it has been a long time since Arkansas beat Alabama, pre-Nick Saban times, back in 2006 when Mike Shula was the head coach in Tuscaloosa. It's the SEC Game of the Week between Arkansas and Alabama, Saturday, 3:30 Eastern on CBS. And joining us now, the voice of the SEC on CBS, Brad Nessler. Before we jump into this game, Brad, let's just go back to last night in the new college football playoff rankings. Georgia and Bama 1-2 again. The top 7 remain the same. What are your takeaways now that we're getting close? Only 3 weeks to go.
Getting close, Chris. I guess if I was a Cincinnati Bearcat fan, that'd be the one thing I'd be looking at. I don't think it really matters until we get to December 5th. Because everything's going to play out if Georgia and Alabama get together, the Big Ten championship game, whatever. But if you're Cincinnati, you want Notre Dame to beat Georgia Tech handily this weekend, and they have to take care of their own business. So, like you said, the top 7 not changing. I don't still get Michigan being ahead of Michigan State, but I'm not on the committee. So when you take a look at it, that's the one thing that doesn't really follow suit so far for me. And if you're a Wake Forest fan, you're in the top 10 and you're 9-1, and you're going to probably play in the ACC championship game in Charlotte. Those people have got to be happy. Oregon, can they beat Utah even this week, much less maybe twice? You got to wonder about that too. So it's going to shake out, and we're going to find out December 5th who belongs and who doesn't belong. And so I don't really worry about the ranks. I think it's great for the fans and all of that, but I don't think it matters right now, to be honest with you.
Yeah, Oregon, number 3, an underdog by 3 points at Utah this week. All right, let's talk number 2, Alabama, number 21, Arkansas, Saturday in Tuscaloosa. Look, an Alabama win over Arkansas gives us what we've been building for all season, Brad, an SEC championship game between Alabama and Georgia. What does a division title mean to Nick Saban?
I don't think they mean that much anymore, Chris. I think you judge Alabama by national championships, not by SEC West or SEC championships. But to get to that title game, they have to go through first Arkansas, then the Iron Bowl, then Georgia. And if they do those 3 things, they're going to be in the college football playoff. I don't care what everybody else does. And, if Georgia takes care of their business, they can still get there too. And it'd be 2 SEC teams in the title game. But, what's really weird about the game against Arkansas is if Arkansas wouldn't have failed on a 2-point conversion against Ole Miss, they'd control their own destiny on getting to Atlanta. Now, if you told an Arkansas fan that at the beginning of the season, they would have said, we'd take that right now. Alabama fans just think you've got to, win the SEC and then you got to win the national championship. So everybody has varying degrees of expectations. And as you take a look at the SEC championships won, and Alabama, they're the standard everybody measures themselves against. And Georgia's the same situation, because if they don't get through Alabama, all the Georgia fans, and I live in Georgia, they've been waiting for this all year long. And this is the year they think they can beat Alabama. So anyway, clincher for Alabama if they beat Arkansas, and then we'll worry about that a couple more weeks from now.
You saw Arkansas earlier on this season beat a Texas A&M team that's the only team to beat Alabama. Arkansas, I mean, just a couple years removed from being not just one of the worst group of Power 5 programs in the country, but one of the worst programs, period. How has Sam Pittman been able to turn this thing around in year 2?
He's done a remarkable job. I mean, when you look at SEC Coaches of the Year candidates, I mean, there's a lot of guys in there, Lane Kiffin and, Coach Stoops at Kentucky. But Sam, I think, considering what he's working with and what he inherited and what it was a year ago and what it is now, it's night and day difference. And you got to give him all the credit. He never takes the credit. He hands the credit out to his coordinators and his coaches and especially his kids. I think the guys that came back, they had a lot of super seniors come back, and that really helped. He's got 3 great leaders on defense in those linebacking core, Graham Morgan and Bumper Poole and Hayden Henry. And, then offensively, what they've done this year with KJ Jefferson, last year he barely played because it was Felipe Franks. And then, Traylon Smith in the backfield. Now it's Dominique Johnson who's kind of taken over at the tailback spot. They've really done a great job on both sides of the ball. They're going to have to be better offensively if they're going to have a chance against Alabama on Saturday, because they've kind of taken things back a little bit and just tried not to make mistakes. That's how they beat LSU with defense and special teams. They faked a field goal that got them a first down. Cam Little, their freshman kicker, had 3 field goals. And so that was just kind of an ugly win, but, they'll take it. Like I heard Sam say, that was the prettiest thing in the world when they win the Golden Boot trophy, watching that final field goal go through the uprights. So they've done it in a variety of ways this year, but I think they're going to have to go back and just pull out all the stops against Alabama, play like they did earlier in the year if they're going to have any chance on Saturday.
Yeah, that kind of leads me into my next question for you, because KJ Jefferson, yes, he's been praised for protecting the football, hasn't thrown an interception his last 4 games, just 3 picks all season long. And those wins that they've had, the big wins this season, they've done it in low-scoring affairs. But can you stay in it against Alabama when you just play it safe?
No, I don't think so. Nobody's, one team's beaten Alabama and one stayed close, and that was LSU. And I think that was just kind of a way that LSU finally came up and said, okay, we're LSU and we play Alabama tough every week or every year. No, they're going to have to score points, and they're going to have to just pull out all the stops on offense. KJ is the catalyst. Obviously, he's probably their best running back. He's obviously their biggest threat. And he's got to get it to some other playmakers. And they haven't been able to do that last year against Alabama. Last 2 years against Alabama has been really nothing. It's 100-10, the score between the 2 games. So they got to get somewhere in the 20s and then hope Alabama makes a bunch of mistakes, to be honest with you.
Yeah, Alabama averaging close to 45 points per game. How does the Arkansas defense match up with what Alabama does on offense, led by Bryce Young, who is a Heisman contender at this point?
Yeah, Bryce is playing lights out, and he's kind of, he's settled in and determined who his guys are. He knows now that John Mechie and Slade Bolden are more of his possession receivers, and Jamison Williams is his home run hitter. He knows that when he gets down close, his 2 tight ends, Latu and Billingsley, are the guy that he looks to go to. So, Bryce is really settled in and knows exactly what's going on. It's senior day, and Brian Robinson's a senior, and I've seen him carry the load in games where they play defenses like this. The Arkansas defense is not built to stop the run, and Brian Robinson, I think, is going to have a huge day on Saturday, as he did earlier this year when they played a similar defense in Ole Miss. So I see it being a kind of a Brian Robinson senior day party on Saturday against the Arkansas defense. Although I will tell you, those 3 linebackers, between the 3 of those guys, they'll have 40 tackles, probably.
Yeah, it might have some sacks as well. Will Anderson Jr. leads the nation with 12.5 sacks. I heard some analysts kind of start banging the Heisman drum for Anderson. Do you think that he should be in contention for one of those spots in New York?
Yes. and I'm a voter, and I don't say anything about who I voted for until after it's all over. But, if you look at defensive players, Jordan Davis has, gotten some praise at Georgia, I think because he takes up most of the screen and he does really play well. But Will Anderson has been unbelievable. 23.5 tackles for loss. He's got almost 20 sacks in his career, 12.5 right now. I think he's on a 3-sack pace on Saturday. I think Federian Mathis will probably have one. Dallas Turner will probably have one. Christian Harris will probably have one. I think it might be a 6 or 7 sack day because I look for Arkansas to probably get behind and have to throw. And when you have to throw and number 31's coming around the corner, it's just not something you want to see as a quarterback. So, yes, I think he is worthy of being in New York, and it wouldn't shock me in the least if he's there along with probably a couple of quarterbacks and a running back from Michigan State. Still got 3 weeks to figure that out, but he's the best I've seen this year, just about at any position. So he's the most valuable player to his team, I think, of anybody I've seen so far, and that's good enough for getting to the Heisman thing.
Brad, I don't think many people are expecting Arkansas to win this football game. What do you expect to see on Saturday afternoon in Tuscaloosa?
You know, Chris, I think if it was on the road or if it was a week later, you know, I don't think Alabama's going to be looking ahead to the Iron Bowl, and I don't think they're going to be looking ahead to the SEC championship game just because Nick Saban's too good a coach, to be honest with you, for that to happen. If it was on the road and it wasn't senior day, I think Arkansas could hang. But final game for a lot of those guys, a lot of the seniors and a lot of the juniors at Bryant-Denny Stadium, they're going to be awake and they're going to want to make a statement and they're going to want to cruise to the Iron Bowl the following week. And I think Arkansas will do some good things and have some moments, but they're not going to have enough moments against Alabama.
Brad Nessler on the call for this one. Alabama with a chance to clinch the division and clinch a spot where Brad is right now from his home in Atlanta as we continue to work toward that matchup between Alabama and Georgia end of the season. I know you can't wait for that, Brad. Thank you so much. The game is on Saturday afternoon at 3:30 Eastern Time on CBS. It's been so long since Arkansas won in this series. Alabama has not lost to Arkansas since Nick Saban took over. Mike Shula was the head coach of the Crimson Tide the last time Arkansas won, way back in 2006.
And let's continue our SEC Super Preview with two of our college football gurus, Emery Hunt and Barrett Sallee. Welcome, gentlemen. Arkansas's last win versus Alabama came in 2006. We've made a big deal about the fact that it was before Nick Saban arrived in Tuscaloosa. Bama scored at least 40 points in each of the last 5 versus Arkansas. Arkansas haven't scored 40 against Bama this century. Emory, I'm not going to ask you why could this meeting be different, but are you expecting something different?
I'm not expecting anything different from an outcome perspective, but I am expecting Arkansas to at least put up a fight. You look at what they've done this year against ranked opponents. They've done a good job on both ends of the line of scrimmage. They've run the football really well. They've been able to collapse the pocket at times, but I want to see them put up a fight more so than what we've seen in years previously. So that's the one change that I'm expecting to see from the Razorbacks in this ball game.
Yeah, I think this is a different Arkansas team than a lot of those. I mean, how many times do you have a guy like KJ Jefferson taking the snaps? I mean, you're talking about a guy who's 6'3", 240, and can run and uses a very versatile running back core to suck up those safeties to go over the top to Treylon Burks and the rest of that crew. So I do think that equating what's going to happen Saturday back to previous years and previous seasons, it is not really the right way to look at this because obviously it's a new coaching staff for the last 2 years. Sam Pittman has taken over, and he's done a really good job buying in. They've got that toughness that Arkansas needs in order to succeed, but they've also got it at the quarterback position. So it is a unique challenge. Yeah, Arkansas is, definitely lacking in terms of a talent perspective, but I think from a scheme perspective, this is just it's a challenge that Nick Saban is not used to from this Arkansas team.
Alabama 56-point winners last week. Nick Saban criticizing his team's consistency in the lead up to that game, saying he challenged them to work on their consistency. They certainly did that last week against New Mexico State. Arkansas beat LSU by 3 to give them a little bit of a confidence boost coming in. Give us a difference maker for this matchup for you, Barrett.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the guy Brad Nessler talked about, and that's Will Anderson Jr. He leads the entire country in sacks, and this guy affects the play all the time. Whether he gets into the backfield or not, he has to be accounted for in a variety of different ways. So Will Anderson, to me, is the guy in this game to keep an eye out because he's going to have to get to KJ Jefferson, but once he gets there, he's got to find a way to get him down. and that's not the easiest thing in the world to do. But you put pressure on KJ Jefferson, he's liable to make some mistakes. He's not necessarily as experienced at this in big games as other quarterbacks. So if Will Anderson gets in the backfield, it's going to be a long day for that Arkansas offense and head coach Sam Pittman.
I'm going to talk about the guy Barrett spoke about just a few seconds ago, and KJ Jefferson. For me, that's the biggest X factor because he's a +1 in the running game. He does show a sense of playing up to the moment. We saw this back when they played Ole Miss. He was able to keep some plays alive, and especially toward the back end of that ball game, they're going to need that. We saw him against Texas A&M step up to the table and play really well. I just want to see him quicken up his sense of urgency. I feel like at times he holds on to the football a little bit too long, waits a little bit too long to make a decision in terms of should I take off, should I find someone down the field. That's going to have to quicken against Alabama. Otherwise, you're going to see him take sacks and be ineffective in the pocket. But if he can be play with a sense of urgency in this game against Alabama and force those pass rushers to defend him as a threat, as a runner, getting outside the pocket, it bodes well for Arkansas because we know they have some talented playmakers on the perimeter and in the backfield. But KJ Jefferson, to me, will play the biggest role in whether or not Arkansas can pull off the upset.
And certainly hang on to the ball and start to stretch out some drives. Bama finishes the regular season at home to Arkansas this week, then at Auburn next week in the Iron Bowl. Barring a major disaster, the likes of which we've rarely seen in the college game, Alabama can lock up the SEC West this weekend. How are the Tide looking as we head towards the playoff, Barrett?
I think there's some concerns, and I wrote this week in SEC Smothered and Covered on CBSSports.com. The lingering problem at Alabama hasn't been fixed. The offensive line is awful in big games, opening holes for Brian Robinson. You go back and watch that LSU game, poor Brian Robinson had nowhere to go. He tried, there was just nowhere to go. They had 6 total rushing yards against LSU. That's unacceptable. And you go back to the Florida game, which they narrowly escaped. Same story there. Texas A&M, they ran for a lot of yards, but the yards per carry, because they tried to keep Texas A&M's offense off the field, was not where it needs to be. So, no, I don't think Alabama right now is a national championship caliber team because their lingering problem has not been fixed, and at this point, I think it's clear that it cannot be fixed.
Man, I totally agree with Barrett right there because when you watch Alabama play, you have to ask yourself, are they one of the top 4 teams in the country? Can they beat Ohio State? Can they beat Oregon? I don't know. And I think when you look at them the last 2 weeks of the season, they have to remind us why we should have them in the top 4. They have to go out and win impressively against a team like Arkansas and really blow the doors off their rival in Auburn. Because right now, there's a lot of leaks on that ship down there in Tuscaloosa. I'm not as sold on Alabama getting through the first round of the playoffs, let alone winning the whole thing. So, and also, they're not better than Georgia. So this is a very, I don't want to say weak team. This is a very solid team, but not one of their best squads. I worry about them in the playoffs. I worry about them in the SEC title game. I worry about them versus Auburn. So they have to finish in a resounding fashion in order to really calm some of those issues that I have for them personally going into what would look to be the playoffs.
Yeah, and you saw there on the graphic, plus 350, third favorite to win the college football playoff, or second favorite to win, pardon me. Early odds for Georgia, Alabama. I went to the deep corners of the internet and did find an SEC title game line. It has the Bulldogs favored by 3 points already at some sports books, but I wouldn't necessarily trust those numbers with 2 weeks to go. Okay, let's stay focused here, though. Bama favored by almost 3 touchdowns against Arkansas this week. The over-under set at 58. What's the play here for you, Emory?
I'm going to lay those points with Alabama. I know we just talked about whether or not Alabama is, a good team or not. Can they beat UTSA, right? But this is a football team that should take care of business against the Razorbacks. For whatever reason, Arkansas's offense hasn't looked right since that Ole Miss game. So I think we'll see this be a get-right game defensively for Alabama, a get-right game for their offensive line as well. And I expect them to play a good, sound football game on both sides of the ball and take care of business. So I trust them to lay those points against the Razorbacks.
Well, I'm going to fade you, Emory. I'm going to take the Razorbacks and grab those points. And the reason is this, it's hard to trust Alabama's offense. So I think Arkansas will get a few stops. And if you're telling me I win a bet with keeping it within 3 touchdowns, I'll absolutely take that. I'll take the under as well because I do think, again, Arkansas will get several stops in this game. The defense for the Hogs has been hit and miss. I get that. But Alabama's one-dimensional by necessity. So to me, I think Arkansas is the play. Grab those points. I think Alabama wins, and maybe even wins handily. But 3 touchdowns is a little too aggressive.
Bama has scored at least 40 points in each of the last 5 versus Arkansas. Barrett taking that chance. He's going to take those points. Barrett, Sallee, and Emery Hunt, part of the College Football Brain Trust here at CBS Sports HQ, getting us ready for Alabama-Arkansas on Saturday. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Nick Saban's first win versus a ranked opponent at Alabama was against the Razorbacks. They've won 10 straight games against ranked opponents. Coming into this one, Alabama has scored, as mentioned, at least 40 in each of the last 5 versus Arkansas. In the last 2 seasons, beaten them by a combined score of 100-10. Hopefully a more competitive game lies in the offing here. Kickoff Saturday afternoon at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time on CBS. And for more college football, check out the Cover 3 podcast. Chip Patterson, Tom Fornelli discussing last night's college football playoff rankings, the latest edition, and the changes to the top 25. Download and follow the Cover 3 wherever you get your podcast audio.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.